Next up, I asked each of our performers if they would kind of write a little biog, or get somebody to write a little biog for them so I could tell you something about it, because I don't know them all. And our next performer is a guy called John Fewings. Now, he lives in Hull, more recently in Beverley, which you see is important, I think, if you live in Hull, to know that distinction between the two. It's like people who live in Hove, near Brighton, and near there it's called Hove, actually, because if you say, do you live in Brighton, they say, no, Hove, actually. He's lived there for 40 years, but he can still remember how to speak proper, albeit with vestiges of a Cockney accent. He says he is not pretentious enough to describe himself as a poet. What is pretentious about being a poet? Nothing at all. But it's his poems cause an audience to smile, to chuckle, to laugh out loud, reflect pensively, or even shed the occasional tear, then he'd be happy. Though if you want to throw money at him and buy his book, he'd be happier still. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for John Fewings!
Poetry or prose. There's a very fine distinction between poetry and prose. It's such a fine dividing line, no one really knows. I mean, you once could tell the difference, because poetry would rhyme. Poets can't be bothered now. They haven't got the time. They can't be asked with lexicons and thesauruses and such, with rhyming schemes, with metre. They don't bother much with much. But me, I'm more traditional. I like a bit of rhyming. I like the metricality of complicated timing. I like the words to skip along with a bit of bounce and bubble. I think poets should be bothered. They ought to take the trouble. Because that's the kind of poetry for which a reader hankers. And if poets can't be bothered, then they're just a load of prose writers. Talking of accents, a lot of my poems are written in different accents, but I usually have to describe what the accent is before the poem, because usually it's not actually recognisable. This is an accent I picked up, well, bits of this poem, from just talking to a Polish mum for about half an hour or so. It's called Pole Position. Anya lives in Krakow. Stanislav in Springbank West. Anya, she has simple tastes. Stanislav wants the best. She says you live in tiny flat, it's nothing but a ghetto. Anya shops in Market Square. Stanislav in Netto. She braids her hair, he primps his curls. She shyly smiles, he chats up girls. She goes to mass, he does not go. He says the UK got no soul. She sends him letters, he sends texts. She longs for cuddles, he longs for sex. She hopes one day to be with him, to hold him in her heart. But as for now, she softly sighs, we are just poles apart. Years ago I read, I was never into poetry very much, I don't think, when I was sort of younger, but I did remember reading the Liverpool poets way back in the 60s, and I read a poem by Adrian Henry called Without You. And I must confess that when I've been back to it recently, I was a bit disappointed, because I don't like it anywhere near as much now as I did then, and I just wonder why. So I've written the poem the way I thought it should have been written in the first place, so that I like it as much now as I would have done if I'd liked it as much as I do now back then, or something like that. And this is just called Without You. Without you, sweet and sour would just taste bitter. Every street be filled with litter. I'd exercise but not get fitter. Need laughing gas to raise a titter. Without you. Without you, Granny Smiths would be less juicy. There'd be no gander for the goosey. It would be nice to see you, Brucey. There'd be no diamonds in the sky for Lucy. Without you. Without you, seedless grapes would be all pippy. Kids today would be twice as lippy. Playground slides would not be slippy. Summer days would all turn nippy. Without you, there never would have been a hippie, nor a bush kangaroo by the name of Skippy. No Jeffrey, Bungle, George or Zippy. They'd run out of chips down the local chippy. There'd be only one S in Mississippi. I would go crazy, balmy, dippy. Without you. Without you, I'm sure I'd lose the will to live, and my poems wouldn't scan or rhyme or anything, and I'd forget what it was I wanted to say and probably just trail off at the end. I have this thing about what I call serious poems and sort of like more light poems. I suppose these are more of my more serious poems. And it's called Merrick. Top-hatted, silk-tied gentlemen and ladies all a-bustle, laugh and joke and giggle and loudly share their fright. Can it be real? Was that a man? My dear, 'twas just a hustle. Their cobble-clatter carriage wheels mispunctuate the night. And when gas lights from the penny gaff are finally extinguished, exhibition over, and the gaffer calls it time, a shadow of a creature drags back toward the workhouse, seeking out the shelter of the shadows and the grime. Nor African, nor Indian, this elephantine creature, muscles heavy burdened with the sackfuls of his bulk, hauls his wearied limbs of gargantuan proportion along the darkened alleyways to loiter and to skunk. Cranial protuberance disguises his humanity. His porridge lumpy cheeks struggle vainly for expression. His physical affliction, oft mistaken for insanity, rarely given second chance to change that first impression. Dragging ragged sackcloth through cobbled veils of piss, his liquid eye of octopus surveys each gin-grey alley. Alights upon a trashy pile where something is amiss. His curiosity aroused, a momentary dally. A rustle of the heat leaves him mindless of himself, for huddled there twixt road and wall, in filthy fetal curl, wafer thin and feather light and flimsy as an elf, scarce lifting up her sorry cup, a ragamuffin girl. He tosses half a penny, and for just a fleeting while, strokes her greasy, scabby head and grieves her sorry plight. And in that fractured second, he elicits half a smile, then shuffles quietly back into the shadows and the night. You know what comedians often say to you, is anybody here from, don't tell them. No, because seriously, after a bit, they sort of home in a bit. And where do you particularly live? What's your street and what's your number? You go home, you've got no telly. Mind you, if you're here, you've probably got no telly anyway. Anyone here from Bridlington? Oh, thank God for that. Because this is about Bridlington, seaside town. Down in the harbour with the sludge ship thick, empty vessels catch their breath and creak. Rising, falling, rising, falling. Not done nought but fall and rise all week. Sullen skies refuse to smile, shop front windows weep with their complaint. Dull-eyed surly bandits turn their faces to the wall. A promenade of promises it ain't. Tarpaulin shrouds on roundabouts, swing boats bound and tied. The ghost train stands dispirited, with no one to take for a ride. Swooping, wheeling herring gulls punctuate the morning. Fighting for a chip, these squawkers sound a raucous warning. Seagull with a broken wing, flapping like a dead umbrella. Polystyrene chip carton scurries like a rat. Pudgy teenage pudding still hunting for a fella. Someone's puked their guts into a kiss-me-quick hat. Slouched beside the bollards in a pink and purple trackie. Bored and listless caller takes a drag between the games. There isn't any novelty. It's all just ticky-tacky. An out-of-season northern seaside town is not the same. It's another accent poem, to in advance. It's a Scots accent. Pretend. It's called Getting Around In. I bagged myself a brace of pheasants while striding up on the moor, and wanted my rifle with me. About a handful more. Then I hiked across the heathered glen till our village inn came near. It's thirsty work is shooting, and I needed to sup me a beer. There was a bike outside, a big black beast with shiny chrome and leather, and on the front by the number plate, a sprig of lucky heather. As I entered the warmth of my local, the rider was propped by the bar. "Yo, Grandad," he cried, "I see you've been shooting. You be a shooting star." I'm a tolerant man by all accounts. The patience of a saint I've got. But the grandad of a greasy-haired yobbo is one thing I'm definitely not. We've not got a jukebox or bandit machines. That kind of thing makes me irate. Just a well-worn welcome awaiting each one. Fresh logs on the fire in the grate. I come here for peace and for quiet. I've no time for him with the mouth. And what makes it doubly annoying is the fact that it comes from the south. I gave her a bit of the pheasant. She smiled. I nodded at her Jack. What ho, Walden? Yobbo jeered again. I did not answer back. Well, ain't you gonna say nothing? At least you could be pleasant. You might be a tight-ass Scotsman, but it wouldn't hurt to give me a pheasant. He swaggered across to where I stood, thrust out his crusty jaw. He seemed to be spoiling for the fight. But I don't do that no more. I just raised my trusty shotgun, put the barrel to his head, squeezed the trigger gently, and shot the bastard dead. He was just another of those social diseases that no one can love but their mothers. Oh, bugger, said Jack. Let's get him out back and put him on stack with the others. Now, I know that I'm not the most generous of fellows, so you might find this astounding. I've an uncanny knack. You just ask Jack. I know when to get around in. And this one's definitely a poem, well, not about Hull, but inspired by Hull. It's called Scrawny. Hanging round my legs with your snotty nose and pigtails. Let me play, please let me play. Football into girls' game, bugger off back home. Or I'll kick your scrawny backside with me boot. Tugging at me sleeve with your perfume and your makeup. Come on dance, please come and dance. Dancing into lads thing. Get off back to girls. Though watch your scrawny backside as you go. Standing in the alley with your knickers round your knees. Kiss me tits, please kiss me tits. Don't you tell your mother, you know you're hardly old enough. And I clutch your scrawny backside for support. Sitting in your kitchen with your mam and dad upstairs. Marry me, please say you'll marry me. You don't have to worry, love. You know that I'll look after you, and I'll treat your scrawny backside with respect. Standing on the steps, with your bouquet and a fancy dress. It's gonna come, I know it's gonna come. Never mind the photos, call a bloody ambulance. I squeeze your scrawny backside, it's alright. Laying on the bed, with your flannel and a bowl. Let me push, please let me push. Do as midwife tells you, pant until she says, and clench that scrawny backside, noisy cow. Standing by the grave, with an hymn book and an handkin. Let me cry, let me fucking cry, for all the times together that we're never going to share. And I'll miss your scrawny backside, so I will. And I'll miss your scrawny backside, so I will.